here with our colleagues from the Higher Education Authority and Research Ireland. What you're effectively looking at here in the room is the Inspire team. So we very much look forward to working with you as we progress this very important programme. And I think that's at the outset. I'm going to just give a little bit of an introduction, and firstly to say that, you know, this is a landmark junction for the higher education research system. Thank you. Sorry, the slides are going through variety. I think firstly it's important to talk about the systemic importance of research infrastructure, because you're going to see this threaded right through the programme applications, assessments, and onward into post-award reporting and metrics. You know, it is absolutely about research performance, but we're looking at its systemic importance right through talent and development, your industry collaborations and research commercialisation, and also importantly your international connectivity. So while Inspire is funding research equipment, the ambition and the intent of the programme is about so much more than that, and we will be looking to see that coming through the entire processes. So just to give a little bit of a strategic context, obviously we have Impact 2030, which is our national research and innovation strategy out to 2030, and that really situates research infrastructure within our wider strategic framework. Our programme for government shows our government's very clear commitment to research and innovation in Ireland, and also to Ireland's development as a knowledge-intensive economy. We have the National Development Plan, which is our overarching capital investment framework, and that's pivotal from an R&I funding perspective. We have, the review last year, which I'll talk to you in a second. And then also, most recently, we have the Action Plan for Competitiveness and Productivity, and that, you know, really crystallises the competitive imperative. Research, innovation and skills is very much at the heart of that. And indeed, this Inspire programme is the first priority action within that plan. So 2025 was, I would say, very much a pivotal and a productive year for R&I policy. On foot of the programme's government commitment to look at the issue of research infrastructure, our minister set up an expert working group, and we were delighted to have both the IUA and the Technological Universities Association participate with us in that. And that's really very much about bringing back a very strategic and systematic approach to our investments in research infrastructure, having regard back to the original PRTLI. So the working group's report underpinned our proposal into the review of the National Development Plan that was undertaken last year by the Department of Public Expenditure, on foot of which this department secured over 4.5 billion, nearly 2.5 billion of which is for research and innovation. And all of that, from the perspective of this morning, culminated in the Minister's launch of the Inspire programme in November last year. So on to Inspire itself. Well, its fundamental purpose is twofold. Firstly, to accelerate the delivery of your institutional strategies. And again, that's across talent development, research performance, innovation and internationalisation. And secondly, it's about advancing national priorities with particular regard to our competitiveness and prosperity. At least 500 million will be invested into funding streams over the next 5 years. We'll have local infrastructure and shared advanced. And this is being delivered very collaboratively and in an integrated way by the Higher Education Authority with Research Ireland. So there'll be 2 phases. Phase 2, building progressively and strategically on phase 1. The focus of the call this morning is to brief you on how we are rolling out phase 1. I would suggest that people are looking for some more detail as well, that you revisit the programme governing framework, because that contains a lot of the detail about what we're looking to see come through the programme and what will be operationalised through the call documentation and processes. I will simply say for now that what we're looking at, or these would be really the critical success factors for the programme and therefore successful applications. This is a step change in public investment in research and innovation, and what we're looking to see is therefore a step change in performance and the role of the higher education system in Ireland's wider development. Secondly, back to my point that while we are funding equipment, we are delivering strategically on Ireland's talent and innovation agendas, and we want to see that come through very comprehensively. Thirdly, subject to robust funding criteria and reporting requirements, the programme is open to all institutions and across all research disciplines. Fourthly, Interinstitutional partnerships are going to be pivotal to the success of the programme, and these really need to be genuine partnerships. We're looking for them in areas of national strategic importance, and what we really want to see is the system performing as exactly that, as a system. And last but far from least, in terms of these factors, while located in the higher education sector, the equipment that we're funding through this programme is very much in service to a national agenda. So the external visibility and accessibility of that kit is going to be pivotal. So that's the whistle stop for from a policy perspective. I'm going to hand over to Katrina in the HEA to start talking us through the call. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki, and good morning, everyone. My name is Katrina Ryan. I'm with the Higher Education Authority and the Research Policy side, and I'm joined by my colleagues Deirdre Quinn and Dean Masterson here today, and we'll all be together working on the Inspire project, particularly phase 1, with our colleagues in the department and in Research Ireland. I really welcome this opportunity to engage with the higher education institutions today. Since the announcement of the call or of the programme back last November, we know that higher education institutions are very interested and are asking us lots of questions. So today is an opportunity to hear about the proposed approach, the objectives, the timings, and the details like that, building on the governing framework document that was all circulated to you in advance of today. But I think it's also important to say that today is as much about as us giving you information, but also hearing from the higher education institutions and getting your feedback and your thoughts and your questions, because we really want to do this right, and a consultative approach is important. So I really encourage you to use the chat function to ask as many questions, raise as many issues as you would like, and also to engage with the email address we'll share at the end if you've questions and thoughts that come to mind subsequent to today's briefing. We may not be able to answer everything today. We'll do our best, but we'll certainly come back to everything you've raised in the call document and in the FAQs document that we'll issue with the call itself. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes today just looking at phase 1. Phase 1 is obviously the start of the Inspire programme, so we'll focus on that today. The objectives of phase 1, the funding available, the eligible institutions, what the call for proposals is going to look like. What are the main things we're going to ask for in that call? An overview of what the assessment will look like, a high-level view of the key criteria that we'll be assessing all of the proposals on, and also to look at what's allowed in programme expenditure and what's not allowed, to give an understanding of that. So moving on then, I suppose, to the objectives of phase 1. We're very acutely aware that there is a need for upgrading of research infrastructure across the higher education system. It's something that higher education institutions have been telling us for some time. So phase 1 is really an opportunity to address that need and to address that deficit. So the objective of phase 1 is to address research infrastructure needs across all higher education institutions while ensuring that alignment with national research and innovation priorities. So we want to use phase 1 to drive a strategic and systematic approach to research infrastructure, both within and between higher education institutions. So we will be looking, even though it's local research infrastructure we're talking about, if there are opportunities for collaboration and for higher education institutions to work together and to share, we're interested in exploiting all of those opportunities and using them. So phase 1 will be based on a call for proposals, and I think the key to take from today's presentation is that call for proposals, the responses must be based in institutional strategy, institutional overarching strategy, and in institutional research strategy, and the needs must be prioritised. We want to see a very clear articulation of what equipment upgrading is needed, what's priority, what's 1, 2, 3, write down the list, and how that is evidence-based and rooted in institutional strategy. As part of phase 1, we will also look at initial expressions of interest for the shared advanced infrastructure needs. Really, I suppose, to get an understanding of what institutions will be looking for in the next phase, while building on what they hope will be the outcome from phase 1. And I know Research Ireland will cover that in a little bit more detail today. So phase 1 is about ensuring that funding delivers maximum impact and effectiveness, while also addressing those infrastructure needs that we know are there within the system. In terms of the funding available over phase 1, I think it's important to say that the details still have to be worked out and the breakdowns across years and phases. But what we can say is that approximately 300 million in funding will be available over a 3-year period from 2026 to 2028 for phase 1 and 2. So phase 1 will be about getting multi-annual proposals from institutions. The proposals will be based over a 3-year period. And we know that in year 1, 99 million will be available for phase 1. So 99 million for phase 1 in 2026. though that's a confirmed figure. And there'll be a review after 3 years. So at the end of the 2028 period, or coming towards the end of 2028, we will be reviewing how the funding has been spent and looking at its impact and how it has delivered on these objectives that are listed here in this slide. I think it's important to say as well that phase one is about addressing the infrastructure deficits across the higher education system. So it's not about having winners and losers. We would like all institutions to benefit from this infrastructure upgrade. Now, that's not to say that only quality proposals that are, as I said, rooted in strategy and prioritised will be funded. But we want to see infrastructure deficits being addressed across all of our higher education institutions. So we will be inviting calls for proposals and to phase one, but we will be asking institutions, we will be giving them an expectation, I suppose, of funding bracket within which we expect their funding bid to be. And that bracket will be consistent with their size and discipline mix. I suppose what I'm really saying is that there's 99 million available in 2026. We don't want one institution coming in and saying we'd like 70 million of that, because that wouldn't be raising everyone's boats, and that's something we want to do as part of this proposal. And by giving institutions that funding bracket, it ensures that we will get strategic and realistic proposals. So moving on then, I suppose, to in phase one, to looking at the eligible institutions. There are 18 eligible institutions under phase one, and these have been worked out with the department, with DEFRIS. As you'll see, they include all the HEA higher education institutions, and also included are the RCSI and the Dublin Institutes for Advanced Studies. So what will the call for proposals look like? Okay, well, I think the requirements of the call for proposals are really set out in the governing framework that you've already seen. But I think just at a high level, the key elements, what we'll be looking for in a call for proposals are HEI's research strategy, a very clear and prioritised articulation of their local infrastructure needs, and an initial expression of interest for the shared advanced infrastructures. So really an EOI for phase two. And I think it'll be very useful to see coming through in phase one what the continuity piece is, like how whatever is funded or looked for under phase one, how will that impact on what an institution sees its requirements under phase two and phase three. And I think it's important to say as well, and that institutions are aware that the expectation is that proposals will be shared across the system. And I think this is particularly important in the context of shared infrastructure, and that if, institutions are developing individually, but at a higher level, the system is developing. So that sharing across the system is important in that respect. And Research Ireland may want to speak more about this on the EOI section. So the areas to address in phase one, call one. What is your institution's research strategy, and how does it fit within your own institution's overall institutional strategy? And I mean, the things we're looking to see here are how does what you're looking for and the investment being sought under phase one, how will it impact on key things such as people development, talent development, research performance, industry collaboration and commercialisation, and international connectivity? We want to see how is the investment impacting on your own organisation in terms of the impact on undergraduate learning, on postgraduate learning, on people development, and then moving beyond that, what is the impact of the research outside of the institution in terms of industry collaboration, commercialisation, and economic and societal impact. And how will the investment then enable your institution to allow this next phase of development in Ireland's higher education and research innovation ecosystem? I suppose we know we're operating where we have national policies for research, and how will whatever investment your institution gets from phase one impact on the delivery of that overall national ambition and national goals for research? So I think I've the bullet points there about accelerating your own institutional strategy, developing talent, world-class researchers, high-skilled graduates, research excellence, global and societal challenge. I think I've kind of addressed most of those points. They will be the key elements that we will be asking institutions to articulate what they're going to achieve through their proposed phase one investment in the call for proposals. And critical to that, I suppose, will be also, can the institution demonstrate in the call for proposals its own capacity to manage its infrastructure? Has it a track record in managing this level of infrastructure and this level of investment? So in phase one call, we'll be looking for very specific details on the investment the institution is looking for, not just the overarching investment, but also what exact local institutional equipment is being sought as part of phase one, and how will this be spent? And it's really important that that's rooted in research strategy, rooted in the institution's overarching strategy, and that it's evidence-based and clearly prioritised. If we come to a point where we're not able to fund the full call or the full bid being looked for under phase one, it's important that everything is clearly prioritised. So we know what does an institution think is most important, and what, if everything can't be funded, what is the least important. And then that longer term piece, I suppose, about phase one is the base, it's the local infrastructure. So how will that assist in the applications for funding under phase 2 and 3? I suppose it's important that in that initial call for proposals for phase 1, we see that long-term thinking in the institution about where it sees this base funding supporting it in the delivery of its own strategy, and whatever funding is available under pillars 2 and 3 and whatever shared infrastructure it's seeking. We're looking for full budgets that links to national priorities and Ireland's competitiveness and prosperity. It's important that the economic impact of the investment is very clearly articulated, and how an institution sees phase 1 as helping it to advance things like commercialisation and utilisation of the research and the research excellence. We'd also like to see, it's very important that that people development piece is part of it, and how does the investment link back to teaching and learning on a day-to-day basis in an institution. Student experience is really important, and the quality of teaching and learning. And it's important that an investment as big as is available under phase 1 can be seen to impact on the day-to-day experiences of students at whatever level in a higher education institution. We know on the undergraduate side, we want the undergraduate students have more opportunities to access research and to engage in research, even in the early stages of undergraduate teaching. So it's important that that impact is seen in an institution's bid for phase 1 as well. Sustainability is important too. How does an institution, I suppose, see the investment under phase 1 being sustainable? How will the equipment be maintained? How will its longevity in the institution be part of its strategy and be protected? And when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about a very holistic approach. It's not just environmental, it's also the long-term life of the equipment within the institution, and how it will keep supporting the institution and its research strategy beyond the lifetime of this programme. So just to give a quick overview of programme expenditure, I think it's clear the funding is for the purchase of equipment and the upgrading of local infrastructure. And I think the governing framework sets that out very clearly about what's allowed and what is the expectations from phase 1. And just to mention about maybe some of the questions initially, so we'll try and answer them, about non-allowable expenditure. In general, we wouldn't expect costs associated with the retrofit of buildings to be included. There might be cases where to upgrade the local equipment and to incorporate that local equipment into an institution, some element of retrofit is needed. And if that happens, we can look at that on a case-by-case basis. But in general, the costs associated with retrofit wouldn't be included. Neither would be administrative staff costs or overheads. So moving on to assessment, the call for proposal itself will give a lot more detail on the assessment criteria, the marks available, and the breakdown and rubric of marks across each of those criteria. But just to give you a high level of what will be in the assessment criteria, I think research strategy and the quality of research strategy will be number one, and how it's delivering on institutional and national priorities and will be part of that. The quality of outcomes, the research excellence that will be enabled by the phase 1 investment, and the impact on teaching and learning and the student experience. I think it's also important to see, as part of proposals, how an institution itself proposes to evaluate its own spend in phase 1. How will it know that it's working? How will it know that it's delivering the impact that it's required? And what adjustments will it make to ensure those outcomes are achieved? So evaluation is an important part of quality. Innovation and impact will be another important criteria. And by that, I mean the economic and societal impact of the investment, the knowledge transfer, the commercialisation, the industry partnerships, and the collaboration, all very important parts of how investment under phase 1 will be assessed. Sustainability is key, and I think I've talked about the holistic approach to sustainability as part of that criterion. The longevity, the environmental, the cybersecurity, all of those key components of a sustainable approach. Value for money is the proposed investment delivering value for money. What level of transformation is going to be delivered through this investment? that will be an important part of the criterion, and as is capacity, the institution's own capacity to deliver on these projects. So I think I'll pause there on phase one and pass on to my colleagues in Research Ireland.
Thanks, Katrina. So yeah, just to talk a little bit about phase two, but today really the focus was perhaps on the overarching goals and objectives of Inspire in a bit more detail on phase one. Because really that first application is a holistic application. It is about how this is grounded in strategy, which is why we are going to ask institutions, even though the call for phase two will probably be a little bit later in the year, to certainly start thinking about how phase two links with phase one and how both of those link with the overarching objectives of Inspire. So certainly it's important to emphasise that phase one strategic submission will absolutely inform the review of phase two. As Nikki said, this is the Inspire team. We're working together on this as a whole. And many of the key issues that have been outlined by Katrina that pertain to phase one will also be absolutely critical in terms of successful phase two applications. So again, just to reiterate, it will be a concise expression of interest that will come in as part of your initial submission, and it will be for high value shared national infrastructures. To go back to the governing framework and to remind people, these are infrastructures that are specifically designed for collaboration across multiple institutions, across sectors, with a key goal to strengthen our competitiveness, drive national innovation and deliver broader public good. We anticipate the minimum value of investments under phase two will be €500,000. And again, just to re-emphasize what Katrina said, but perhaps even more so, the capacity to manage these infrastructures as shared facilities will be absolutely critical to a successful application. So we will certainly be coming back, with further thoughts on this in more detail once we see your questions. But it's likely at the moment that the full submission will take place towards the end of 2026. So I'm going to hand back to Katrina now just for next steps in terms of the webinar.
Thanks, Ruth. Just in conclusion, I suppose I just wanted to give a provisional overview of expected timelines. I suppose today starts the beginning of a consultative phase where we're very interested to hear feedback from the institutions on what we've presented today. So we've listed an email there, research@hea.ie. So if anyone has any thoughts, comments, questions, we'd be grateful to receive them by the end of February. They're Friday the 27th. We will use the information from today, and we will develop our call with the expectation that a call will be launched in March or April. Institutions would then have to submit proposals by approximately June, assessment process taking place over the summer with the announcement of outcomes over September. Now, I'll just reiterate they are provisional timelines, but I suppose that is what we're working towards at the moment.
Thanks very much, Katrina. So as I said at the beginning, we're going to take a short break now. So it's just after 11:25. I think maybe to give you a realistic tea break, we'll come back at 20 to 12. So we'll actually take a little bit longer than 5 minutes just to review the questions. So we will leave the webinar open, I think, Denise, won't we? But we'll just go on mute, and then we'll come back and answer as many of the questions that have come in as at 20 to 12. So thanks very much, and we'll talk to you in a few minutes. Welcome back, and thank you so much for all those really interesting points and questions. I'm going to hand over to Nikki first. There's been a few questions about kind of the relationship between pillar one, phase one and two, and then maybe the pillar three that's also in the governing framework. Nikki, so will you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, thanks. Just to say, I mean, we had the working group report, which took a wider sweep of the landscape, and that had called out 3 pillars. To be very clear, and if you look at the programme governing framework for Inspire, this is related to pillar 1, so local institutional infrastructure, and 2, shared advanced infrastructures. That's what this programme and what these calls are in relation to. In terms of the sort of the linkages between the two, it is very much, we would see when coming in phase 1, as Katrina outlined clearly at the outset, is each institution will submit what we call a capstone submission, a strategic submission, which will firstly cover in some detail how existing deficits in local infrastructure will be addressed through phase 1, and set out an overarching picture through expressions of interest of what people are seeking and who possible partners are for the shared advanced infrastructure, because we're looking to see a very cohesive strategic submission. And to be clear, to pick up one of the other questions, each application will come from a higher education institution, and it will not come in from individual centres, accelerators. Each institution is making an application with a view to driving a very strategic and systematic approach. Looking further down the line through phase 2, there may be people coming in, partnering, collaborating, but it is the higher education institutions who need to be making the applications. Yeah. I hope that covers that.
That's great. Thanks. There's also been a number of questions on the kind of brackets that Katrina, that you spoke about. Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I think that's coming through in a lot of the questions and maybe causing a bit of concern. So I want to allay any concerns institutions have about that. Just to reassure everyone that these will be brackets that are quite broad, and they will allow institutions to make very compelling plans and to obtain higher levels of funding from through phase 1. And I suppose we have just, in the HEA, we have lots of funding models and lots of metrics that inform a variety of different funding models. And we are looking at all of those metrics to help us develop indicative estimates of what might be likely for an institution from a fund of this size. But we will increase that to allow bigger brands for each institution. And we're also testing our models to make sure that our metrics make sense and that they're fit for purpose. So we are looking at things like student numbers, research student numbers, the overall size of the institution, its stage of development, and all of those things. But just to reassure institutions, the brackets will be as fair as possible and will allow institutions to bid higher than as high as possible, and that better plans will have the opportunity to earn additional funding through the approach.
We were also asked about the review, whether there'll be external reviewers involved over the summer as we review, I suppose, particularly phase 1.
Yes, we expect there will be external review. And I think the external review would be particularly important from a strategic perspective. It's the review of the strategies in institutions.
Yeah, I think there was also a question about timelines, and obviously there isn't a huge amount of time between the call opening and closing, but I think we anticipate that the information here today will be a good basis for people to be starting to get ready in terms of their applications.
Yes, that's fair.
There's also a number of questions on phase 2 around size of equipment. So we do anticipate that will be for the larger pieces of equipment. And we're also been asked about whether there will be limits. I mean, that isn't absolutely defined at this stage, but I mean, back to what Nikki and Katrina have said, prioritization and strategic alignment will be key. So, we would anticipate that we see applications coming in that align with priorities at an institutional and national level. There's obviously a lot of questions around things like service costs, maintenance, and technical support. I mean, we anticipate that these pieces of equipment will be run on the basis of access charge plans. And it's really critical that those access charge plans are set up such that there, is presumably sufficient demand, that the equipment will be being used regularly, and that the access charges are set at such a rate that the equipment can be sustainably managed. I mean, things like installation costs and service contracts have traditionally been allowed in research infrastructure calls, and we'll certainly be looking at those, although it's hard to be absolutely definitive because some of these things would be on a case-by-case basis. For example, I think we have a question here on arts and humanities research, where the advanced infrastructure itself could be something like a performance space. So we absolutely recognise, that there may be certain arrangements which are essential in particular disciplines, and the call is absolutely open to those applications aligned with institutional strategies. Just doing a quick scan for anything else that is for us to answer today. I hope we've covered off most of those. So I'm actually going to hand over to Assistant Secretary of the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science, William Bosang, just to say a few closing words, but just to say thank you very much for joining us on the webinar this morning, and your input is very valuable. William.
So very grateful to everyone for their participation and engagement. Obviously, we provided a lot of information. We hope we provided a lot of information this morning, and including from the governing framework that we circulated earlier. We've responded to some of your questions. Obviously, having the totality of your questions this morning and the follow-on questions would be really useful to us in helping to shape the finalisation of our approach. So the plan is to develop an FAQ, which we'll kind of feedback out into the system. So really going to conclude, and I think it'll be clear to everybody from what they've heard about the Inspire, going back to the launch by the Minister last November, looking at the governing framework, hearing the presentations this morning. This is very much a strategic initiative. So in terms of kind of an overall kind of advice or guidance, from us this morning, I'd say thinking about that in that way is really important. And I think in making it a success for your institution and for the system as a whole, if you continue to focus on how you relate what's happening in your institutions to your own strategies, and then to national strategies, and to the Minister's objectives to strengthen our research and innovation system through the very significant, £500 million plus investment that's going to be made under this programme over the next couple of years. I won't say you won't go wrong, but what I'd say is there's less chance you'll go wrong. And obviously, we're very open, and I hope this seminar and the circulation of the governing framework demonstrates it. We're very open to kind of appropriate engagement to make sure that the final design of the scheme, the first calls, is guided, shaped, informed by the good questions and the important questions that you're posed for us this morning, and I'm sure that the follow-on questions will receive. So just to conclude, to thank in particular Nikki from the department, but also colleagues from Research Ireland and HEA for all the work that they've done. I mean, when I reflect on it, the working group, as Nikki said, only started work last March. The NDP outcome was only achieved in October. Here we are on the 9th of February, and we're discussing advanced features of what the calls should be, how the calls have been designed. So it's good progress. We want to maintain that progress, but we very much need, as is demonstrated by your participation this morning, your engagement, your help, and your commitment to those shared objectives for the development of the system that will support the system and then support your institutions, and support in particular the kind of researchers in our system that are crucial to the objectives that we're setting ourselves. So thanks very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.